Good morning, students. How are you today? You're welcome to this brand new week. Let's go straight to what we have today. Today our topic is concept or theory of demand. Lesson objectives. At the end of this lesson, students should be able to 1. Explain the meaning of demand for a commodity. 2. Distinguish between want and demand. 3. Draw and interpret demand schedules and demand curves. 4. State the laws of demand and supply. 5. Explain the types of demand. 6. Explain factors affecting demand. Now let's go to the theory of demand. What is demand? You must have been hearing of demand. There's this saying which goes as, teach a parrot demand and supply and you have made an economist of him or her. So what is demand? Demand is the quantity of any commodity or goods and services that consumers are willing and able to buy at a particular price and at a particular time. So, demand doesn't just mean desire. You must have that willingness and the ability. So 2 things are very, very important for demand to take place. There must be willingness and there must be ability. Willingness means you're willing to part with your money. Some people can have money, they don't want to part with it. And then the ability means, yes, you have the money to spend on the commodity. We probably have what we call effective demand. Effective demand is having the willingness and the ability to pay. Once you're able to pay for a commodity you want, we say you have effective demand for it. Now, demand is inversely related to price. From our demand function, QD is equal to F into P, where QD stands for quantity demanded, F is function, P is price. Meaning that quantity demanded of a commodity depends on the price of that commodity. It is pertinent to distinguish between need, want, and demand. These 3 concepts mean different things to economists. What is need? Need is something you cannot do without. The essentials of life, the necessities of life. What are our basic needs? The basic needs of man is food, clothing, and shelter. Those things you cannot do without. They are your needs. Now, what is want? Want is something you can do without. A mere desire to have something. Like if you're a student now, you would desire to have a car. Of what use will a car be to you as a student? So it's a mere desire. You can do without it. That is want. Then demand, like I said, is the ability and the willingness of a consumer to buy a given quantity of a commodity at a particular price and at a particular time. Are you following? Okay. Next, we want to look at demand schedule. What is demand schedule? Demand schedule is a table. It's a table that shows you different quantities of a commodity which consumers are willing to buy at various prices at a particular time. So just know that anytime you hear of demand schedule, it's talking about a table. You look at a table, draw a table, where on the left-hand side you have the price, on the right-hand side you have quantity demanded. So the various quantities demanded of a commodity at varying prices called demand schedule. We have 2 types of demand schedule. We have individual demand schedule and market demand schedule. What is in the individual demand schedule? It is a table which shows the different quantities of a commodity which a consumer would purchase at various prices at a particular time. You can see this is a hypothetical individual demand schedule for tin tomatoes for Mr. Obi. Like I said, on the left-hand side, you have price per tin in Naira. On the right-hand side, you have quantity demanded per month. From here, from this table, when the price it was 20 naira, quantity demanded is 100 tins. When the price of a tin increased from 20 to 40, what happened to quantity demanded? Quantity demanded decreased from 100 to 80. As the price continues to increase from 40 to 60, quantity demanded decreases. It continues, as price continues to increase from 20 to even 120, quantity demanded came to 0. What is the implication? From this table is very obvious. One thing is very certain. And what is that? That as price increases, quantity demanded decreases. Meaning that price and quantity demanded are inversely related. As price increases, quantity demanded decreases. And as price decreases, quantity demanded increases. That is for market individual demand schedule. So for market demand schedule, you're looking at the totality of all the consumers of this particular product. What is that product? We're looking at price of tomatoes. We're looking at tomatoes. The first one was an individual. This one is market demand. That means the total consumers of this particular commodity, tin tomatoes. So a market demand schedule is a table which shows the total quantities of a commodity, which all consumers of that commodity are willing to buy at various prices at a particular period of time. It can also be called an aggregate demand schedule, or a total demand schedule, or a composite demand schedule. A hypothetical market demand schedule for tin tomatoes. From this table you can see, on the first column we have price per tin in naira, followed by quantity demanded. Quantity demanded by Mr. Obi, Mr. Ani, Mr. Keke, Mrs. Afam. We assume that these four consumers are the market, the people that demand for the tin tomatoes. So when you sum up all the demand, quantity demanded by each of these ones, when you sum up the quantity demanded by Mr. Obi, which is 40 naira, 40 tins here, when the price was 100 naira, Mr. Ani bought 20. Okay, 40. Mrs. Afam bought 20. If you sum them all, 40 plus 20 will give you 60. 60 plus 40, 100, 120. So we add up, we sum up the total quantity demanded by these consumers of tin tomatoes at each price, you get what we call the market demand, or the composite demand, or the total demand for the commodity at various prices. So the above table shows the relationship between the different prices of tin tomatoes and the total quantities which the consumers are willing to buy at each price. We assume that there are only 4 consumers of tinned tomatoes. So these 4 consumers, when you sum up whatever they have bought, it gives you the aggregate demand, or the total demand, or the market demand for these tinned tomatoes at various prices. Like we saw in the individual demand curve, demand schedule. Here, the same thing occurs. When the price is 100 naira, quantity demanded, total market demand is 120. As the price decreased from 100 to 80, quantity demanded increased from 120 to 240 tins of tomatoes. As price continues to go down from 80 to 60, we can see quantity demanded increased from 240 to 360. From 60 to 40, quantity demanded increased to 480. When the price decreased to 20 naira per tin, quantity demanded catapulted to 600 tins of tomatoes, meaning that a decrease in price brings about an increase in quantity demanded, and that is the first law of demand and supply. The law of demand and supply says, as price increases, quantity demanded decreases, and as price decreases, quantity demanded increases. All things being equal, or what we call in economics, ceteris paribus. So, having said that, remember we said that demand curve is a graph or a diagram representing the market, representing the demand schedule. And like we have individual and market demand curves, schedules, we equally have individual and market demand curves. So individual demand curve represents individual demand schedule, while market demand curves represent market demand schedules. Here we have the individual demand curve. It's representing the table we had before. This table, hypothetical individual demand curve for tin tomatoes for Mr. B. Mr. Obi, we can represent this thing, this schedule now, in a graph. In a graph. And when we present it in a graph, we call it individual demand curve. You can see, as price increases or price decreased, when the price was 120, quantity demanded, on the vertical axis we have price, on the horizontal axis we have quantity demanded, and then we have point of origin. Point of origin is always labeled 0. So from this diagram, we can see that the demand curve, this line sloping downwards is called the demand curve. And we can see that it is negatively sloped. Meaning that as price, look at it, as price increases, the price is 120, quantity demanded is 0. As price decreases, quantity demanded decreases. So the implication, this is the first law. As price decreases, quantity demanded of a commodity increases. So know that the normal demand curve is negatively sloped. It slopes downwards from the left to the right, implying that a decrease in price attracts an increase in quantity demanded. I hope we're following. Good. So the above demand curve slopes downwards from left to right. It therefore has a negative slope or a negative gradient, which implies that at higher prices, demand falls, and vice versa. For example, when the price is 120, nothing was demanded. But as soon as the price falls to 120, the quantity demanded increased to 100 tubers of yam. So the other one is market demand curve. Market demand curve is a diagram. It's a diagrammatical representation of the market demand schedule. So the schedule is the table, while the curve is the diagram. Whatever is in the table is translated into the diagram. So it is equally the same thing as that of individual. The only thing is that this one is the totality, the aggregate of the people that demanded for that pieces of yam, as the case may be. So we can see, like I said, you can see that the demand curve, the normal demand curve, is always negatively sloped. It slopes downwards from the left to the right, implying that as price decreases, quantity demanded increases. Conclusively, a demand curve is defined as a graphical or diagrammatical representation of a demand schedule. The price is plotted on the y-axis, while the quantity demanded is plotted on the x-axis. The next thing is the law of demand. What is the law of demand? First law. The law of demand states that at higher price, less is demanded, and at a lower price, more is demanded. Ceteris paribus, all things being equal, because there's a certain time, we will explain that. It is not all the time that as price increases, quantity demanded decreases. Coming to that. So, but just know that under normal circumstances, once there's increase in price, quantity demanded of any commodity decreases, and vice versa. Let's look at the nature of demand curve and the first law of demand and supply. It is easily observed from the diagram or graph that the demand curve slopes downwards from the left to the right, as we have seen. That means that it has a negative slope. This illustrates the first law of demand and supply, which states that the higher the price, the smaller the quantity demanded. While the lower the price, the larger the quantity that would be bought, all things being equal. Several explanations can be given for this. Why do we have it? Why do we say that at the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded? And the lower the price, the higher the quantity demanded. It happens because of the following reasons. One is income effect. When there's a decrease in income, or rather, when there's a decrease in price, what happens? It increases the real income of consumers. It does not mean that somebody who is earning 20,000 naira, if the price decreases, they will pay him or her more. No. It means that his 20,000 naira can now buy more goods and services. So income effect. A fall in the price of a commodity will lead to an increase in consumers' real income. That means the purchasing power of money. Once there's decrease in price, the purchasing power of money increases and more goods and services can be bought using the same amount of money. Example, if the price of a bottle of Coke falls from 100 naira to 50 naira, then 100 naira can now buy 2 bottles of Coke instead of 1. Conversely, a rise in price of the commodity will have a reverse effect. So what is it saying here? That if a bottle of Coke, which sells for 100 naira, now drops to 50 naira, and you have 100 naira, your 100 naira will now buy you 2 bottles of Coke, even though your income has not increased one bit. So that's what we call income effect. So a decrease in price brings about an increase in consumers' real income. With the same amount of money, you can now buy more goods and services. Income effect. Another reason why the demand curve slopes downwards is because of what we call substitution effect. What do you mean by this? If the price of a commodity, say, example, Milo, falls, what happens? If the price of Milo falls, while the prices of its substitutes remain constant, many consumers will switch over to buying Milo because since they give you the same satisfaction. So if the price of a commodity, say Milo, falls, consumers of its substitutes, like Ovaltine, may switch over to Milo if the price of Ovaltine is relatively high and would purchase more Milo with a lower price. On the contrary, less of a commodity will be purchased if its price rises and many consumers will switch over to its substitutes. So have substitution effect, income effect being reasons, some of the reasons for negative slope of the demand curve. Other reasons are what you call effect of the law of diminishing marginal utility. What is law of diminishing marginal utility? The law of diminishing, what is utility, by the way? Utility is satisfaction a consumer derives from consuming goods and services. So the effect of law of diminishing returns states that the more of a commodity a consumer consumes, the less satisfaction he gets from it. So the law states that the law of diminishing marginal utility states that the satisfaction derived from additional units of a commodity decreases as an individual continues to consume more and more of it. For instance, satisfaction derived from drinking more and more sachets of water by someone who is thirsty will fall after some time. The consumer will only buy a commodity if he considers the satisfaction to be derived from it more or equal to the price. Hence, as price falls, more will be bought. On the other hand, he will buy less if the price increases, since he considers the marginal utility to be relatively lower than the price. So these are some of the reasons why the demand curve is negatively sloped. I said the first one is because of income effect. The second one, substitution effect. The third one, the effect of law of diminishing marginal utility. If the prices are falling and consumers are deriving more satisfaction from consuming that particular product, they will buy more of it, and vice versa. Are you following? Good. Next is types of demand. Types of demand. Types of demand. We have about 4 types of demand. The first one is joint or complementary demand. Just as the name sounds, joint. Joint or complementary demand arises when 2 or more commodities are needed jointly to give you the same, to satisfy a want. 2 or more commodities are needed to satisfy a want. One complements the other. You cannot use one in the absence of the other. So as the demand for one increases, the demand for the other also increases. Example, we have toothpaste and toothbrush. If you buy toothpaste, you must buy toothbrush. If you buy a car, you must buy petrol. If you buy torchlight, you buy, except if it is rechargeable. Ordinary torchlight, you buy your battery, and so on. So these are examples of joint demand. So joint demand or complementary demand arises when 2 or more commodities are demanded at the same time to satisfy a particular want. You cannot buy one in isolation. One will not give you the satisfaction you want. You must buy the complement. One, because they are complementing each other. They are used simultaneously. Second type of demand is what we call competitive demand. This is demand for substitutes. Substitutes are goods that give you the same satisfaction. So they can be used interchangeably. You can buy one at the expense of the other. Like with what are substitutes? Like I said, beverages. You buy Milo, go to the market. Assuming you have demand for beverages. You don't go to the market. Okay, what are, like I said, beverages? You have Milo, Ovaltine, Choco Milo, and all whatnot. You don't go to the market and tell them you want Bonvita, you want Milo, you want Ovaltine, you want Choco Milo. You must be out of your mind. So you just buy one and leave the other because they give you the same satisfaction. And what happens is that when the price of one increases, while the prices of other ones remain the same, you forget the one whose price has increased and buy the other. So competitive demand, like I said, is demand for substitutes. And substitutes are those goods that give you the same satisfaction, those goods that can be changed, that can be used interchangeably. You buy one at the expense of the other. You can buy meat and forget fish. You can buy Milo and forget Bonvita. You buy tea or coffee, butter and margarine. They give you the same satisfaction. Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, Oral-B, Colgate, and what have you. An increase in demand for one causes a decrease in demand for the other. The position of one makes the position of the other unnecessary. Like I said, you don't go to the market buying Milo, Bonvita, Ovaltine, and what have you. So that is competitive demand. The third one is derived demand. Derived demand is demand for factors of production, demand for labor. You don't just engage people to eat them. You buy them, you engage people to come and work for them to help in producing goods and services that give satisfaction. So derived demand is a demand. This is demand for a commodity which is not needed for direct satisfaction, but rather for the production of other goods. Example, demand for labor and other factors of production. So demand for labor is a derived demand. You demand for labor, you employ people to help you produce goods and services, and these goods and services are what give people satisfaction. So derived demand is a demand that arises not for immediate satisfaction, but what they'll help to produce that gives satisfaction. Lastly, we have composite demand. Composite is aggregate, totality of a commodity. This refers to total or aggregate demand for a commodity which has several uses. The composite demand for cassava, for instance, comprises demand for cassava for its various uses. Example, you can use cassava for so many things. For gari, for making industrial starch, for making fufu. So the composite demand is total demand for a commodity, for the various uses. Commodity for the various uses. I give example with cassava. You can buy cassava. If you buy cassava, or even beans. Beans can be used for various things. Eat it like that. Cook and eat. You can use it for making akara. And use it for making moi moi and other things. That is what we call composite demand. So these are the 4 types of demand: composite demand, derived demand, competitive demand or joint, competitive demand, complementary or joint demand. Now, from this diagram, it says, with the aid of a diagram, analyze the effect of a decrease in the import duty on cars, on the price and consumption of petrol. First of all, you ask yourself, from this diagram, on the vertical axis, we have price of cars. Horizontally, we have quantity of cars. We can see, first of all, the effect of a decrease in import duty on cars. When there's a decrease in import duty is the duty you pay, the tax you pay to the government to import the cars into the country, bringing the cars into the country. So if the import duty decreases, what happens? It will reduce the cost of cars. And when the price of cars decrease, what happens? Equally, the demand for cars will increase. You can see if the price, the first effect of decrease in import duty on cars is that the price of cars will decrease. You can see, originally it was at P0. This is quantity, this is demand, this is demand. This is the demand curve. Here we have the supply. Initially at the price P0, quantity demanded and supplied. We have Q0 here. Now when the price decreased because of decrease in import duty to P1, quantity demanded and supplied increased from Q0 to Q1. That is one effect. Then its effect on the price and consumption of petrol is that because there's increase in quantity demanded of cars, demand for petrol will equally increase. And once the consumption of petrol increases, price of petrol will increase. So the second effect is that here we have, on the vertical axis, we have price of petrol. On the horizontal, we have quantity of petrol demanded. When the price, with the increase in price, of course, like I said, when there's increase in quantity demanded of petrol, increase in quantity demanded of car will elicit increase in quantity demanded of petrol. And once there's increase in quantity demanded, it will attract increase in price of petrol. So from figure 1, the first one is figure 1. This is figure 1. This one is figure 2. From figure 1, a decrease in the import duty on cars resulted in a reduction in the price of cars from P0 to P1. This leads to an increase in quantity demanded of cars from Q0 to Q1. Now, an increase in the quantity demanded of cars brings about an increase in consumption of petrol, like I've said. This shifts the demand curve from D0. There's an outward shift of the demand curve from D0 to D1. The price of petrol increases equally from P0 to P1, as shown in figure 2. So, we want to illustrate what we have done. Demand. With the aid of diagram, analyze the effect of a decrease in import duty on cars on the price and consumption of petrol. So from this diagram, you can see on the vertical axis we have price of cars. We have quantity of cars demanded on the horizontal axis. When the price was initially P0, quantity demanded of cars was Q0. When the price decreased from P0 to P1, quantity demanded increased from Q0 to Q1. Remember I said that once there's a decrease in import duty on cars, the first effect it will have on cars is that there will be decrease in price of cars. And once there's decrease in price of cars, it will elicit increase in quantity demanded of cars. So you can see an increase in price. A decrease in price of cars led to an increase in quantity demanded of cars. And what quantity demanded of cars and quantity demanded of petrol. Once there's increase in quantity demanded of petrol, it will lead to increase in price of petrol. From figure 1, a decrease in the import duty on cars results in a reduction in the price of cars from P0 to P1. This leads to an increase in quantity demanded of cars from Q0 to Q1. An increase in the quantity demanded of cars brings about an increase in consumption of petrol. This shifts the demand curve from D0 to D1. The price of petrol increases from P0 to P1 as shown in figure 2. So having discussed about that, factors affecting demand is the next thing we want to look at. What are those factors? What are those things people consider before? Or what are those things that make consumers to either increase or decrease their demand for a particular commodity? We say we have a number of factors that determine the demand for a commodity. What are they? These factors are: 1, the first and foremost is the price of the commodity. Normally, once the price of a commodity is low, quantity demanded of that commodity is high. And if the price is high, quantity demanded is low, all things being equal. The second factor affecting demand is the price of other commodities. Commodities can be complementary goods or substitutes. Complementary goods are those goods that are, like I explained before, are used in conjunction with the other. If you buy one, you must buy the other. But substitutes are those goods that are used interchangeably. If you buy one, you forget about the other. So the price of other goods, other commodities affect demand. A decrease in the price of a commodity would increase the demand for its complements. Yes, a decrease in price of a commodity. If there's a decrease in price of a commodity, what happens to that commodity? The demand for it will increase. So if demand for it increases, what will happen to the complements? The demand for the complement will also increase. But if it is a substitute, if the price of the substitute decreases, what happens to the demand for the other substitute? The demand will fall. So, but decrease in demand for its substitute, yes. If the demand for one increases, demand for the substitute will decrease. But it will lead to increase in demand for complements. We are looking at factors affecting demand. Those things that will make consumers to buy more or less of a commodity. So another factor affecting demand is change in consumers' income. When there's increase in consumers' income, naturally there will be increase in quantity demanded of a commodity. But if the consumer's income decreases, quantity demanded decreases as well. A consumer with high income is likely to buy more of a commodity than someone with a low income. An increase in the income of a consumer leads to an increase in quantity bought or demanded of a commodity, and vice versa. If consumers' income increases, quantity demanded increases, and vice versa. Another thing is weather conditions and the seasons. Factors affecting demand, weather conditions and seasons. So demand depends on the season and condition. During the rainy season, there are demands for certain goods. During the dry season, some products are in high demand. So demand for commodities are influenced by weather conditions. Example, Vaseline, cardigans, and blankets are in high demand during the Harmattan season. But now that we are in rainy season, umbrellas, raincoats are in high demand. Now during the dry season, we have more of cool things, ice cream and what have you. Another factor affecting demand is changes in population size and structure. An increase in population, of course, will naturally increase demand for goods and services. And when there's a decrease in population, demand for goods and services also decreases. Change in consumers' tastes and fashion is the sixth factor affecting demand. When there's a strong change in taste, strong desire to have something. So a stronger taste for a commodity induces higher demand. When consumers are in need, they demand for a particular commodity. The demand for it will be high. Another factor affecting demand is government policy. Government policy can be in form of taxation. If there's increase in taxation, the government increases taxes of people. Their demand, of course, the income will increase. Disposable income will increase, and demand for goods and services will decrease. But if government wants to increase the people's demand for a particular product, government can reduce tax so that people's disposable income will increase and quantity demanded of that commodity will increase. Finally, of the factors affecting demand is expectation of future changes in price. If consumers are anticipating that prices will rise in future, what do they do now? They buy more and stock. But if they're anticipating price fall in the future, they would withhold their purchases. Even when the prices are low now, they withhold their purchases until finally the prices crash. They will now buy more. So these are some of the factors affecting demand. Some of the factors that will make consumers to buy more or less of a particular commodity. Any questions? Good. Evaluation. Answer the following questions. 1. What is demand? 2. Differentiate between want and demand. 3. What is demand schedule and demand curve? State the law of demand. 5. List the types of demand. 6. State the factors affecting demand. Now, these are the answers to your questions. You can copy them into your notes. Demand, want, demand schedule, and what have you.